The Bedouins are an Arab semi-nomadic group, descended from nomads who have historically inhabited the Arabian and Syrian deserts. Their name means desert dwellers in Arabic language. Their territory stretches from the vast deserts of North Africa to the rocky sands of the Middle East. They are traditionally divided into tribes, or clans, and share a common culture of herding camels and goats. The Bedouin form a part of but are not synonymous with the modern concept of the Arabs. Bedouins have been referred to by various names throughout history, including Kidarites in the Old Testament, and Arabar by the Assyrians. They are referred to as the Aarab in the Quran. While many Bedouins have abandoned their nomadic and tribal traditions for modern urban lifestyle, they retain traditional Bedouin culture with concepts of belonging to Ash'ariyah, traditional music, poetry, dances, and many other cultural practices. Urbanized Bedouins also organize cultural festivals, usually held several times a year, in which they gather with other Bedouins to partake in and learn about various Bedouin traditions, from poetry recitation and traditional sword dances, to classes teaching traditional tent knitting and playing traditional Bedouin musical instruments. Traditions like camel riding and camping in the deserts are also popular leisure activities for urbanized Bedouins who live within close proximity to deserts or other wilderness areas. Etymology. The term Bedouin derives from a plural form of the Arabic word Bedawi, as it is pronounced in colloquial dialects. The Arabic term Bedawi literally translates in Arabic as nomad or wanderer. It is derived from the word Badiya, which means plain or desert. The term Bedouin therefore means those in Badiya or those in the desert. In English usage, however, the form Bedouin is commonly used for the singular term, the plural being Bedouins, as indicated by the Oxford English Dictionary, 2nd edition. The term Bedouin also uses the same root word as the Arabic noun for the beginning, Bedaya. The Arabs believe the Bedouins to be the predecessors to the settled Arabs, and the word for the ethnicity itself may be influenced by that society. A widely quoted Bedouin saying is, "I against my brother and I against my cousin, and my cousin and I against the stranger." This saying signifies a hierarchy of loyalties based on proximity of kinship that runs from the nuclear family through the lineage, the tribe, and, in principle at least, to an entire genetic or linguistic group. Disputes are settled, interests are pursued, and justice and order are maintained by means of this frame, according to an ethic of self-help and collective responsibility. The individual family unit typically consisted of 3 or 4 adults and any number of children. When resources were plentiful, several tents would travel together as a goum. These groups were sometimes linked by patriarchal lineage, but were just as likely linked by marriage, acquaintance, or no clearly defined relation but a simple shared membership in the tribe. The next scale of interaction within groups was the Ibn or descent group, commonly of 3 to 5 generations. These were often linked to goums, but where a goum would generally consist of people all with the same herd type. Descent groups were frequently split up over several economic activities, thus allowing a degree of risk management. Should one group of members of a descent group suffer economically, the other members of the descent group would be able to support them. Whilst the phrase descent group suggests purely a lineage-based arrangement, in reality these groups were fluid and adapted their genealogies to take in new members. The largest scale of tribal interactions is the tribe as a whole, led by a sheikh. The tribe often claims descent from one common ancestor, as mentioned above. The tribal level is the level that mediated between the Bedouin and the outside governments and organizations. Distinct structure of the Bedouin society leads to long-lasting rivalries between different clans. Bedouin traditionally had strong honor codes and traditional systems of justice. Dispensation in Bedouin society typically revolved around such codes. The bishara, or ordeal by fire, is a well-known Bedouin practice of lie detection. See also, Honor codes of the Bedouin, Bedouin systems of justice, traditions, livestock and herding, principally of goats and dromedary camels, comprise the traditional livelihoods of Bedouins. These two animals were used for meat, dairy products and wool. Most of the staple foods that made up the Bedouins' diet were dairy products. Camels, in particular, had numerous cultural and functional uses. Having been regarded as a gift from God, they were the main food source and method of transportation for many Bedouins. In addition to their extraordinary milking potentials under harsh desert conditions, their meat was occasionally consumed by Bedouins. As a cultural tradition, camel races were organized during celebratory occasions, such as weddings or religious festivals. Oral poetry was the most popular art form among Bedouins. Having a poet in one's tribe was highly regarded in society. In addition to serving as a form of art, poetry was used as a means of conveying information and social control. History. Early history. Historically, the Bedouin engaged in nomadic herding, agriculture and sometimes fishing. A major source of income was the taxation of caravans, and tributes collected from non-Bedouin settlements. They also earned income by transporting goods and people in caravans across the desert. Scarcity of water and of permanent pastoral land required them to move constantly. The Moroccan traveller, Ibn Battuta, reported that in 1326 on the route to Gaza, the Egyptian authorities had a customs post at Katia on the north coast of Sinai. Here Bedouin were being used to guard the road and track down those trying to cross the border without permission. The early medieval grammarians and scholars seeking to develop a system of standardizing the contemporary classical Arabic for maximal intelligibility across the Arabophone areas, believed that the Bedouins spoke the purest, most conservative variety of the language. To solve irregularities of pronunciation, the Bedouin were asked to recite certain poems, whereafter consensus was relied on to decide the pronunciation and spelling of a given word. Ottoman period. Under the Tanzimat reforms in 1858, a new Ottoman land law was issued which offered legal grounds for the displacement of the Bedouin. As the Ottoman Empire gradually lost power, this law instituted an unprecedented land registration process which was also meant to boost the empire's tax base. Few Bedouin opted to register their lands with the Ottoman tapu, due to lack of enforcement by the Ottomans, illiteracy, refusal to pay taxes and lack of relevance of written documentation of ownership to the Bedouin way of life at that time. At the end of the 19th century, Sultan Abdul Hamid II settled loyal Muslim populations from the Balkan and Caucasus among areas predominantly populated by the nomads in the regions of modern Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel and Palestine, and also created several permanent Bedouin settlements, although the majority of them did not remain. Ottoman authorities also initiated private acquisition of large plots of state land offered by the Sultan to the absentee landowners. Numerous tenants were brought in order to cultivate the newly acquired lands. Often it came at the expense of the Bedouin lands. In the late 19th century, many Bedouin began transition to a semi-nomadic lifestyle. One of the factors was the influence of the Ottoman Empire authorities, who started a forced sedentarization of the Bedouin living on its territory. The Ottoman authorities viewed the Bedouin as a threat to the state's control and worked hard on establishing law and order in the Negev. During World War I, the Negev Bedouin fought with the Turks against the British but later withdrew from the conflict. Hamad Pasha al-Sufi, sheikh of the Naimot sub-tribe of the Tarabin, led a force of 1,500 men which joined the Turkish offensive against the Suez Canal. In Orientalist historiography, the Negev Bedouin have been described as remaining largely unaffected by changes in the outside world until recently. Their society was often considered a world without time. Recent scholars have challenged the notion of the Bedouin as fossilized, or stagnant, reflections of an unchanging desert culture. Emmanuel Marx has shown that Bedouin were engaged in a constantly dynamic reciprocal relation with urban centers. Bedouin scholar Michael Meeker explains that the city was to be found in their midst. In the 20th century, in the 1950s and 1960s, large numbers of Bedouin throughout Midwest Asia started to leave the traditional nomadic life to settle in the cities of Midwest Asia, especially as hot ranges have shrunk and populations have grown. For example, in Syria, the Bedouin way of life effectively ended during a severe drought from 1958 to 1961, which forced many Bedouin to abandon herding for standard jobs. Similarly, governmental policies in Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Iraq, Tunisia, oil-producing Arab states of the Persian Gulf and Libya, as well as of desire for improved standards of living, effectively led most Bedouin to become settled citizens of various nations, rather than stateless nomadic herders. Governmental policies pressing the Bedouin have in some cases been executed in an attempt to provide service, but in others have been based on the desire to seize land traditionally roved and controlled by the Bedouin. In recent years, some Bedouin have adopted the pastime of raising and breeding white doves, while others have rejuvenated the traditional practice of falconry.